The Russians started this crisis when they brought Admiral Gorshkov, a Russian fry armed with Sirkin hypersonic missiles within striking range of the S. That's why Admiral Gove had been followed by NATO navies since he left port on January 4th. Last week, the Russian warship was heading towards us. The ship was thought to be heading towards the Horn of Africa, but the Russian Admiral frigate was caught by radar while heading west. It was stated that the warship was seen on the radar in the neutral waters of the Atlantic Ocean that is at an effective salvo launch distance from the U.S. coast. Before leaving the port, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that the crew of the ship was ready to carry out combat operations. The Russians first ignited the tension in the sea with this. On the other hand, the Portuguese Navy, which is a NATO member, went after the Russian frigate, Admiral Gove, and its companion tanker. However, the frigate unexpectedly turned west while the wedge continued south of the Zos. According to radar monitoring site Ittermill radar, Admiral Gove was spotted about 1,287 kilometers west of the island. The floors and at that distance, it would not yet be within range of the USA with its CIR missiles. The frigate was also believed to carry the caliber cruise missiles used by the Kremlin in Ukraine. In addition, the Type 23 frigate HMS Portland was following the Russian frigate, cruising close to the UK. During this pursuit, Admiral Gonchko was stopped by the Royal Navy while crossing the English Channel, after departing from the Arctic Naval Base. It was reported that Admiral Gorshkov, who then continued on its route, is now seen in the Atlantic Ocean. The Russian Navy's latest missile frigate, Admiral Gorshkov, is still on course during its long-distance deployment in the Atlantic Ocean, causing serious tension in this region. The Russian Defense Ministry reported Admiral Gorshkov is released into the Atlantic as a tension escalator. This could reveal Russia's desperation and its policy of distraction. In addition to the Russian frigate hovering off the U.S. coast, Russian bombers also came into contact with the U.S. Air Forces near Alaska and Canadian airspace this week. All this reveals the helplessness and games of the Russians. However, while the Chinese and Russian navies were operating in the U.S. and NATO navies postponed their plant exercises in order not to escalate the tension. This attitude also reveals the difference of opinion between the two conventional groups. This week, the crew of the Northern Fleet Admiral of the Soviet Union Fleet G-Shock frigate conducted artillery fire on a naval target while performing long-range deployment missions in the South Atlantic as part of preparations for joint naval. During the exercises, the crew of the frigate fired from the 130mm AK-192M ship-borne multipurpose artillery system at a naval target, simulating a fictitious enemy warship at a distance of over 10 kilometers. The crew of the frigate practiced target designation to use the battleship's artillery. In the statement, it was said that the crew of the Russian frigate conducted exercises to create electronic interference to counter the precision weapons of the simulate. The Russian ministry confirmed that the target was successfully hit during the exercises. The frigate had previously conducted air defense exercises in the Norwegian Sea and then headed to the Atlantic Ocean to complete the assigned mission. The Russian Ministry of Defense had previously announced plans for naval exercises off the coast of South Africa, with the South African and Chinese navies in February. With the realization of these exercises, the tension in international waters reached. This exercise, which was carried out by Admiral Gorshkov in the Atlantic, upon the order of the Russian leader of Vladimir Putin, was actually the Russian leader's show of strength. However, if the USA does not act calmly in the face of the situation and does not take the Russians into consideration, it may render the efforts and aim of the Russians completely helpless. Also, when we look at the situation from a broad perspective, Putin, who is trying to achieve something by using Gonchko, seems to be cornered and making such provocations out of. Because you may remember that the Russian leader confronted the world with his nuclear threats in the last 5 months when the Ukrainian army performed at a high level. Today, however, Putin is showing that he has no other choice, citing the most important missile ship of the Russian Navy, Admiral Gorshkov. But on the other hand, this strategy of the Russian leader, of course, contains an element of danger because the tactical nuclear weapons in Admiral Gorshkov pose a particularly serious threat in the various operational scenario in which no countries may be involved. This ship belongs to the Northern Fleet of Russia. It is also true that during the Soviet war, ships of the Northern Fleet regularly launched with nuclear weapons. But with the exercise in the Atlantic, it was the first time that the modern Russian Federation did the same. Following the exercise, Norwegian intelligence stated that the key part of the nuclear potential is in the submarines and surface ships of the Russian Northern Fleet. According to the report of the Norwegian Secret, Tactical nuclear weapons pose a particularly serious threat in various operational scenarios in which NATO countries may be involved. In addition, this report highlights that Russia also has submarine capabilities, anti-satellite weapons, and cyber capabilities that could threaten Norway and the alliance. On the other hand, ongoing tensions between Russia and the West mean that Russia will continue to be the biggest nuclear threat to NATO. And therefore, it cannot be ruled out that a local war can turn into a wider conflict with direct military intervention by Russia, the USA, NATO, and Norway. The report also states that Russia will maintain, modernize, and develop its nuclear arsenal, but no major changes are expected in Russian nuclear doctrine in the coming years already. The Defense Intelligence of Ukraine had previously declared that it considers the threat by Russia to use tactical nuclear weapons against Ukraine too. At the same time, according to Ukraine's intelligence chief Kybov, Russia would not launch a nuclear attack in the near future. While all these tremors continued on the world agenda, critical statements came from the USA. After Russia's exercise in the Atlantic, a U.S. State Department official said at a high-level event related to the region that Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine has ended decades of cooperation. The United States aims to restart projects that do not involve Russia in the Arctic Council and emphasizes working closely with Norway. Going forward, the United States continues to accelerate its Arctic engagement. U.S. Arctic Research Commission officials announced that 2023 and 24 goals at an event at the Wilson Center earlier this week after Mike Frazier announced his nomination as the nation's first Grand Ambassador to. As keynote speaker, Alaska Senator Murkowski noted the event represented the first public announcement of the Commission's goals for the first time in the U.S. Arc's nearly 40-year history. The Commission announced its 2-year goals as part of an event, aside from presenting U.S. Arc's objectives, which included for the first time a chapter on Arctic economics to better understand where the potential of the region might lie, such as Arctic shipping. The impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the Arctic was Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine for no reason has upset decades of cooperation. Among the 8 Arctic states, Russia has the most territory and population north of the Arctic Circle. But Moscow's decision to inmate its neighbor, an independent and sovereign state, makes cooperation in the foreseeable future almost impossible. Even before launching the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II, Moscow embarked on an aggressive program of remilitarizing the Arctic. It began building or modernizing base, expanding its icebreaker fleet, and developing and testing dangerous naval weapon systems. This was against preserving the high north as a low-tension zone. In short, while the effects of the crisis caused by the Russians in international waters continue to grow rapidly, Putin does not realize that he's sailing in risky and dangerous seas. ASI confronts the world when the Russian leader realizes all this. Maybe it'll be too